Let's talk about energy balance. Energy balance is something that you would need to understand because it relates to your weight, it relates to your body function. It's something that's so key to nutrition that in order to understand how to gain, maintain, or even lose, you would have to understand how to achieve a positive energy balance, a negative energy balance, or a stable one to maintain your weight. And then also, because weight really is just a kind of a number that we use as a reference point, but more importantly, we need to have a energy balance that supports our muscles, our organs, and our day-to-day life. But in order to understand this idea of energy balance, to break it down, we need to understand how do we measure energy? What is that unit? And then the next part is, what is this balance? Is it an equation? Is it something that we use? And what goes into that equation? So for our measurement, we use something called a calorie. So for calories, or kilocalorie is kind of the technical term. And so a calorie is that measure of energy that is needed to raise 1 gram of water 1 degree of Celsius. And calorie is something that you'll find on most nutrition facts labels and something that you can look up for all the kinds of foods that you eat because it actually factors into that balance. And balance is, like, another way to think about it is this first law of thermodynamics, or thermo for short. The first law of thermodynamics says that energy in is equal to energy out. So where does the energy come in from? So the energy that comes into your body is food. If we were plants, it would be energy that we get from the sun. So with food, that's one key part of this equation. And where does energy go? So energy goes out into things like physical activity. It goes into something called basal metabolic rate. It goes into growth, especially if you're a teenager or if you haven't reached your full potential. It also helps with, or it also goes into healing. It goes into this thing called the thermic effect of food. It's kind of like when you're tossing wood into a fire, the fire actually releases some heat. So actually by digesting the food, there's this thermic effect of releasing energy. And so out of all of these, physical activity and its counterpart, sedentary activity, are probably one of the thing to focus on if you want to manage your weight. Because managing weight, if you wanted to lose weight, would require that you have a negative energy balance, which ultimately would mean eating food that has less calories or smaller portions of those foods and exercising more or being less sedentary. But to give you an idea of what is the breakdown of all of this, like for example, if we had this whole pie, and what is the breakdown of percentage? Just to give you an idea of like how it breaks down. So for physical activity, ranging from if you're sedentary to active, it can be 0 to 10%. And like another way to think about it is like a mile of brisk walking for 15 to 20 minutes is about 100 calories. But that definitely changes depending on the person, how tall you are, how much you weigh. But you can get more information on the ChooseMyPlate.gov website. Basal metabolic rate would be about 60% for sedentary people. Growth, it depends, specific for adolescents. Thermic effect is about 10%. So how can you calculate the amount of calories that you need? Well, you could see a dietitian. You can use some energy equations that kind of estimate it. You can use this thing where you breathe into it. It's called an indirect calometer. It kind of measures the amount of CO2 that you produce from how much you eat, or this thing called the super tracker that's found on the Choose My Plate website. Another way that you can think about it is when you're food logging, not food jogging, food logging, you can just kind of take what you eat in a typical day and you can subtract 500 calories from it if you wanted to lose weight, or add 500 calories. And where are they getting this 500 calories from? Well, 500 calories comes from this idea that about 1 pound of weight is equal to 3,500. And we're finding out more and more over the years when we're studying this that it doesn't actually come out to this, that we're not really closed systems, but it's a starting point to kind of understand how you would gain or lose weight. So I wrote down this table to summarize this equation and kind of this idea of, let's say for example that food and physical activity, there's things that you can actually adjust. If you wanted to lose weight, you could decrease your portion sizes, decrease the energy density. So what do I mean? I mean that for some people, choosing high sugar, high fat foods would have very high energy density. For physical activity, you would try to reach about 60 minutes per day, and for sedentary activity, you would have less than 2 hours per day. If you wanted to gain weight, like for example, if you wanted to gain muscle, not just fat, you could figure out, why are you eating? Are you eating because of hunger or emotion? What is the type? What is the amount? And then increasing this. For physical activity, you would decrease that and you would increase sedentary activity. And again, I treated this column as something that you want, if you wanted to gain weight. But let's say you wanted to explain why you gained weight. So why you would gain weight, maybe because you're eating when you're feeling strong emotions, when you're not actually hungry, and all the same reasons over here. So the final question is, should I be counting calories? So the more I learn about nutrition, the more I learn that it's less about what's right and wrong, but more important about knowing what are, for example, the risks and benefits of every choice that I make, or how is it balanced? Because the thing with calories is that it gives you the overall amount of energy, but the thing is, we eat things that have different kinds of calories, like you have more nutrient-dense calories and less nutritious calories. So the risks of calorie counting would be that it can be, just put this in red, the risks could be that it's too specific, it's too hard to count, it's hard to record, mixed foods are really hard to estimate, but what are the benefits? The benefits is that it gives you a starting point. It helps with awareness. And it's a way of figuring out that energy balance of, like, how do you gain or how do you lose?